Welcome to the first of the New World Colloquy series at the Fast Food and Cafe Virtual Expo. Through this series, we bring to you one on one conversations with stalwarts from the industry. And to share with us an investor's perspective on food retail, we have with us today none other than Biju Kurian, the strategy board member at El Caterton Asia. And in conversation with him is Chitra Narayanan, the editorial consultant at the Hindu Business Line. So without much ado, over to you, Chitra.
Good to be here it's good to be here at the Fast Food Virtual Expo. I mean, it's a very different format from the previous years, right? I mean, but virtual has its own charm, and I'm sure that it's going to be an interesting expo over the next month. And good to be speaking with you, Viju. You bring with you so much retail experience, and are an investor with stakes in the restaurant industry. So I'm sure you'll have a lot of perspectives for the industry at large. I mean, the restaurant industry has been really badly impacted. I think amongst one of the worst hit by the pandemic. So so where, I mean, as an investor, where do you, I mean, long do you see the impact? Is it going to be short term, or do you think it will have very long term consequences, and will it lead to big shifts? If you can give a take on the impact.
Sure. So, when you think of the restaurant industry, think of it as one more consumption opportunity for customers, for consumers. And, consumers consume different things. They consume entertainment, they consume food, they consume luxury, they consume automobiles. So from that perspective, think of the restaurant industry as being one more. And what you're seeing today in the restaurant industry is purely a reflection of consumer behavior. To start with, of course, we had the lockdown. And because of the lockdown, consumers weren't allowed to go out of their homes except for buying essential products. So that certainly meant that no restaurant was going to be allowed to open and no consumer could go to one. The second part of it is when, the unlock phase started. And when the unlock phase started, at that stage, they started allowing restaurants to open, but only for takeaways. So a few restaurants actually decided that it might make sense for us to open and provide takeaways. So because of which some of them started actually moving, selling things where takeaways happen. So when you think of it from that perspective, see it as how comfortable consumers are with going out. And we've seen that in consumer behavior too. Consumers have been wary first of going out of their homes. So when they actually started going out, they started going to shops which are close by in order to be able to buy essential products and come back. So most of them were cooking at home. When the restaurants opened for takeaways, a few actually ventured out at that point of time, saying that, okay, fine, for a break, so that we don't get bored of eating home cooked food, let's go and get something either for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. And that's how they first, started moving out. And now when in some states, of course, restaurants are open. In fact, in many states, restaurants are open. And only in a few states are restaurants not allowed to open. What you're seeing is that fear of actually stepping out of the home continues to remain. And the fear of going to what you might define as a public space is still uppermost in the minds of the consumer. And one of the biggest impacts have been restaurants. And that is, I think, something which will take a long while. Our own estimate is that it'll take anywhere from about a year and a half to two before you can even start thinking about restaurants actually coming back onto maybe the same level that they were prior to the COVID pandemic. So it's not going to be short term at all. It's going to be long term. And when it's long term, obviously, you should expect that many, many things are likely to happen. Some won't survive, some will survive, some will pivot their models and become different from what they set out to be. But you should expect a lot of changes in the restaurants and the cafe industry over the course of the next 1.5 to 2 years. But certainly a lot of that you will see in the first 6 months itself. So purely reflective of consumer behavior. The way consumers are behaving is the way restaurants are actually progressing. And because consumers are wary of going out today, restaurants are unfortunately finding it difficult to be able to generate business. The second part of it is, of course, restrictions. And several states have had restrictions in terms of what can open, how long can you open. Some states recently in the north, they said that malls have to be closed on weekends, which means that a restaurant, if it's in a mall, certainly will be closed on that weekend. You have to, curfew is there from 7 o'clock, 9 o'clock. So different ways in which these restrictions are played out, which has pretty much restricted the the way a restaurant can actually operate. So that also, I think, is going to constrain the operations of restaurants. While that might go away sooner, my own feeling is that consumer behavior will take a lot longer to make them feel comfortable to walk into a restaurant. A cure, maybe. A vaccine, certainly, will give consumers the confidence to step out. So that's a slightly long answer to what you asked, Chitra.
No, it's good you address the consumer behavior part, because I was going to come to that and ask about, I mean, will people have the same view to dining out ever again? And we've seen this whole phenomena that Accenture calls cocooning, where people have got used to being at home. So, at home becomes the focus. And I think a lot of restaurants have realized, and if you can't go to the restaurant, they come to you, right? So they
Absolutely.
feel sending. I mean, we've seen some evolution of interesting formats, like people have, I think, with Dalmia and others have kind of sent do-it-yourself meal kits, and people have done, chef on hire, and there's, I mean, food delivery, of course, but with some frills, etc. So everybody's kind of pivoting, and do you see some of those will be permanent pivots because there could be a business model in those?
Uh, it could be. And I mean, just to dwell on your whole concept of cocooning, it's not just human behavior, it's animal behavior. So even if you think of, let's say, the polar bear, think of an ant, and look at their behavior between summer and winter, and look at how they actually retreat back into their homes during winter, and they gather enough food prior to that and bring it back into their homes. And when their homes could be a hole in the wall, could be a cave in the forest, or whatever you might define as a home for those animals. But that is the basic animal behavior. When you're not sure about what the future is going to be, you just kind of gather things for yourself and then actually retreat back into the comfort of your home. And that's what all of us as humans are doing, which is that we're just gathering things around us and retreating back into our homes. So just to dwell on your cocooning behavior. But as you mentioned, I think a lot of restaurants have actually looked at pivoting the models, and I think in several ways these pivots actually will work well. It's not that just a single one of them is actually going to be the most favorable, the most profitable, but all of these, in some form or the other, will make sense. So if I'm a fine dining restaurant and and if I'm a customer going to a fine dining restaurant, and I'm going there because of the quality of the food and because of the fact that I appreciate what the chef is doing. And then when you tell me that I can have a chef on hire because the restaurant is closed, I'll say, hey, I'm going there because of that chef. So why don't I get him to come home? And if I'm having a small gathering at home, whatever be the restrictions around the size of the gathering, then certainly this is a chef that I like, whose food I appreciate, and they can come home and be able to cook the same things that are being done there. There are food which is actually what you define as do-it-yourself kits, and this is to give people the pleasure of feeling that they're actually doing something worthwhile. Because you think of going out and eating in a restaurant, or going out and buying food and bringing it back to your home as probably not something which is uh, it's not something that you feel very comfortable about, or it's not something that you feel very proud about. Whereas on the other hand, when you get a do-it-yourself kit and you're bringing it back home, and there's a little bit of preparation that happens around it, you don't feel as guilty as going out and eating. So even that's another way in which a lot of restaurants have been able to say, even if you don't want to come in and sit, if you don't want to, buy our food ready made and take away, but you want to feel the pleasure of actually making your own food, then a DIY kit is a great way for you to be able to do that. Then, of course, there are people who've been looking at innovating in terms of, just giving away, I mean, ready-made food, which you just go and take away. It's also now extended because the government has allowed the restaurants and the bars to be able to sell alcohol at regular prices. So, you sell alcohol at regular prices, but then you also have cocktails, which are ready-made cocktails. You can't consume it on premise, but you can actually buy it there and bring it back home. Because alcohol at regular prices, which you buy back and bring home and pour out, it doesn't sound as exciting as, say, a martini that you can have at home. But you're not confident about making a martini. But here you can go to a restaurant and get a cocktail pack, which you can then bring back and make your martini at home and serve it along with the chef on hire who's there cooking a meal in your restaurant, in your house. So, there are ways in which you can try and recreate that larger restaurant experience, because at the end of it, it's a social evening. And the reason why you go to a restaurant is not because, I mean, one part of if it is, it's certainly the food, but the other part of it is the fact that it's a social evening, it's a social environment that you're creating. And if you can recreate something like that in your home through a combination of such things, then these are things that certainly can do. So, when I think about it, each one of this is an innovation by itself, and each one of this will work well depending on what kind of restaurant you are. So if I tell, let's say, a fast food restaurant, give me a chef on hire, certainly doesn't make sense. Whereas if it's a fine dining restaurant, chef on hire certainly makes sense. A fast food restaurant will be a takeaway. If it's a well-known pub or a restaurant which serves great range of cocktails, then getting a cocktail mix from them is certainly a great way to be able to generate some revenues in these difficult times. So it will depend on what your background is as a restaurant or as a cafe, and what's the kind of food people come to you normally for, and how to be able to give them the same food. Though you might not, now of course many restaurants allow you to be able to come in and eat also there, but because customers are wary, you can give them the same food even if they're wary of walking in and sitting in your restaurant, while not actually on the same hand, while not, what compromising, as I might call, the quality that you might have otherwise served.
Okay, that's interesting. And let's see if these all last for the long term or not and become a permanent model for an alternate revenue generators of sorts, right? So there's also, I mean, the pandemic or the lockdown period, I think the 3 months that we were completely locked up, that was also a time for restaurants to sit down and look at their, plans and look at their whole, go back to the drawing board and look at their strategy, etc. So there's been some, analysts who have kind of said that the foundations of the industry has been pretty weak. Like there's been over franchising and there's been some of the fundamentals were not correct. Do you think this is actually a lot of people would sit down and look at the fundamentals and reevaluate and take corrective measures? It in a way, it actually, I mean, already those who had, we've heard that 30% of restaurants have actually shut down. I don't know if that figure is accurate. You could probably corroborate that. But do you think there's been a lot of it'll actually lead to more efficiencies in reopening?
Uh, Certainly, I think the pandemic and the lockdown came as a rude shock to everybody. Uh, and what I think a lot of people realize at that point of time is that your ability to survive the entire lockdown and survive the slowdown which comes after the lockdown and survive the growth, however slow that curve might be, will all depend on the availability of capital that you have with you. So that is one part of it. The second part of it is that in terms of the costs, everybody has had to pare costs down to a minimum to be able to make sure that they survive the longest. Because what we know at the end of this game is that the survival will not depend on the fittest, but the survival will depend on the person with the largest amount of money in the bank. And the only way you can preserve that cash is by one, making sure that you get more cash into the bank. And the second is to make sure that you reduce your expenses as much as possible. So a lot of restaurateurs and cafe owners actually reflected back on how do I reduce costs. And amongst costs, and unfortunately, this is one business where the cost of the product is very low. You can get by between 20 to 30% of your revenues might be the actual cost of the food. But when you think of all the other operating expenses, your kitchen expenses, your front of house expenses, your rental expenses, your advertising expenses, all of those expenses, those actually occupy a significant part of the revenue. So they started looking at all of the other what you might define as the non-food expenses, because food is anyway variable. If you don't have a customer, you don't actually have to buy food, you don't have to buy the ingredients to prepare the food, but how to look at the rest of it. And between the other two things, the two main things which were there are actually rentals and people cost. So a lot of people, then a lot of owners went back to the landlords, went back to mall owners, told them about the fact that they were locked down, they can't afford to pay the rent because they don't have any revenues. And many of them actually managed to get a favorable response from the landlords, whether they be independent landlords, or whether they were mall developers. They managed to get a favorable response. Many of them also realized that they have a lot of staff. So if your restaurant is closed, then your front of house staff are the ones which you actually have to first think about and figure out how many do you actually need to keep. So there was some amount of reduction of the front of house staff. Back of house staff, there are two kinds of people. There are critical back of house staff, which are the chefs, the sous chef, all of those kind of people, and you decide how many of them do you want to actually keep. And then, of course, there's the other support staff at the back of house. So that is the other area. And then you have the administrative staff, or between accounting, purchasing, those areas. So everybody actually took a hard look at their operating costs and decided how to be able to shrink this to the least which is required, the least in the context of the need to preserve cash, the least in the context of the fact that I have to be able to even protect my assets, because at the end of the day, when you get the opportunity to open, you can't start hiring at that point of time. So you also want to protect your key assets. So how do you make sure that I protect the key assets and then shed those whom I think I can actually recover over a period of time? So this is the way most people actually looked at it. And I think many have actually done a good job about this. Obviously, the better capitalized ones are the ones which actually will have recovered well. But there are many who actually were even at the fringe of being a profitable operation prior to the pandemic itself. And a lot of them just keeled over the moment the pandemic happened and the moment the lockdown happened. And a lot of them will never ever come back into business. So, to my mind, I think 30% is a reasonable number. I don't think it is an overestimate. I think it's a realistic number, as to the number of people who are not likely to come back at the end of this entire opening up of the economy.
Uh, it's quite sad, the human impact part of it, that the people cost, there must have been scores who lost their jobs, right? I mean, but I mean, it was also in a way inevitable. But at the same time, do you feel that the staffing requirements might now change for the restaurant industry, since food deliveries are becoming a focus, and we might need hygiene consultants now? I mean, because that's going to be when you we did a I mean, I saw a poll somewhere which said what would be the factors that would induce you to visit a restaurant or a hotel, and everybody picked hygiene as the top factor, which is not very surprising. So, I mean, so would you see a different kind of staffing requirement apart from the usual chefs, and of course the the culinary experts will be there, but other than that?
Yeah, so the hotel industry, I think, was one of the first to realize this. And if you were to really look at the number of staff per room, varying anywhere from between 2.5 to 5, depending the kind of hotel that you are, and when you actually compare those to the number of staff per room, per key, as you might call it, in European hotels and American hotels, you realize that you're heavily overstaffed. So that is one part of it. A lot of the hotels which are open for the COVID business actually managed to get uh, managed to run their hotels at much lower staff levels during this entire COVID. Uh, I might call it a COVID boom time, because their hotels were occupied 70-80%, but largely by COVID quarantine patients, and paying a much lower charge than what you would normally get in the hotel, but it still managed to cover some of your fixed costs. So they realized that they were actually able to manage with much lower staff per room. So I think there's a realization that the hotel industry is overstaffed, and I think that same realization is also coming to the restaurant industry and the cafe industry. At the end of the day, the because we always think of people being and especially in the front of house, the staff there actually are paid amongst the lowest. What you feel is that you throw people at a problem and you think your service levels will improve because of that. And a lot of restaurants are actually overstaffed in that area now, because of two or three reasons. One reason, of course, is the fact that you can't keep as many tables as before because of social distancing norms. So the number of people you require front of house today itself is reduced because of your social distancing norms. The second is that the number of customers who are walking into your restaurant are considerably less than the number who used to come in the past. That itself makes you actually have to deploy only a lesser number of people in the front of house than what you had in the past. The third is that you have several offices which are still work from home, and because you work from home, you don't have the usual office crowds which come over for a meal. You don't have celebrations happening in the restaurant. So all of that traffic is actually missing. And if that traffic is missing, then even the recovery is also going to take that much longer. So that is another reason why a lot of people haven't deployed enough people in the front of house. So the front of house actually has seen a lot of cuts in the last couple of months, at least, since the restaurants have been opened. The back of house also, because of scale, and the scale being much lower, operating at a much lower level than what they used to do in the past, that has also seen a lot more cuts. But restaurants have had to figure out, how do I make sure that I'm able to integrate digital technologies into my operations, such that I can actually take orders from customers outside. How do I integrate well with the aggregators like Swiggy, Zomato, and make sure that their orders are actually fulfilled on priority? How do I make sure that by between my packaging which I have currently versus the delivery packaging which is required, how do I make sure that that is actually designed and made in a manner which will ensure speedy packaging and delivery? uh, some of the restaurants have decided to do delivery service themselves, so they have deployed some of the front of house stuff also for deliveries to make sure that they can go and deliver to homes. So a lot of changes in the business model has occurred. Uh, the roles of people have actually changed. Digital transformation has actually happened. But overall, if you were to look at it, the number of people working in a restaurant today is considerably less than what it used to be in the past.
That's quite, yeah. I guess that rationalization had to come. But do you think we will also see the emergence of new entrepreneurs? Usually they say that when one door closes, another opens. So we've seen now. In fact, interestingly, we saw a lot of hobby chefs coming up. Holding master classes and stuff like that. And who knows, some of them might open restaurants. So do you see actually that we could see the start of a? We also saw that some new kinds of foods trended. So, do you think there is scope for a full set of new entrepreneurs to emerge? And we've seen also cloud kitchens. So, your take on those concepts?
Yeah. So certainly, I think when I look at it from an industry perspective, this is a time for consolidation. And during this consolidation phase, what you will discover is that some of the chain restaurants will actually look at the portfolio that they have and decide which are the locations that they want to retain and which are the locations that they want to close. So that is one thing which will happen. The second that is likely to happen is that you will find some restaurants, individual restaurants, or some chains also actually folding up because of the fact that they are not able to, they don't see a business case for continuing, even if the recovery happens in the future. So that is another case that you might certainly see. So what you will see is that you will certainly see this as an opportunity for some of the better heeled restaurants, the ones which have got more capital on their balance sheets, to be able to go in and start acquiring weaker competitors. So that is one thing that you're likely to see. The second that you're likely to see is that you will actually get to see many of the others, many existing players who want to continue, will see this as an opportunity to be able to acquire new locations, because they're suddenly finding that locations are coming much cheaper than what used to come in the past. And they might actually say that, hey, I've got a location just maybe, 2 doors away from where I am, but today the rental on that is half of what I'm currently paying. And if I really look at, moving from here to there, even taking into account my write down of fixed assets, I still feel that that might be a better opportunity for me. Many will do that. Many will actually find appropriate location in a new area that they were looking to expand to, which has suddenly become available because somebody has walked out of that particular location. So many will actually expand at this point of time. So like you see acquisitions, there will also be expansion. Many of the weaker ones, and especially the ones which have single restaurants, they will actually find that it's going to be difficult to be able to run it, because for some of them it was actually born more out of a passion and less out of a business model. And they said that, I love food, I love cooking food, I want to make sure that I start up a restaurant, but sometimes they forget, that I have to be able to balance between revenues and costs and things like that. And that is one of the reasons why, you will find a lot of them actually closing up, and they will pivot the model. And I've seen some of them pivoted. So I've seen some cafes which actually used to have great baked goods, saying that, I don't want to run a cafe any longer, but I will actually run a bakery from another location. I will, target the same customers that I used to get in the past, but only with baked goods, which might be maybe 50% of the revenues that they did in the past, but the cost probably are going to be half of, even less than half of the cost that they used to incur in the past. So that's another thing that you're likely to see. I don't see new entrepreneurs coming in, but a lot of people who discovered new talents of cooking, during this lockdown, might feel actually tempted, saying that, hey, I'm actually a reasonably good baker. If I can bake here, why don't I think of actually doing this as a business? Or maybe, you will find a lot of fledgling bakers suddenly emerging post the lockdown. And I've seen this happen because, there are people who used to make cheese for their homes, suddenly discovering that, people are stuck at home and they want to buy cheese. They can't go to a store, and they say, oh, hey, don't worry, just order from me, pay on Google Pay, and I will send it across. You can come and pick it up from me. People who make baked goods, and suddenly, popularizing what they are making on the residents' welfare associations or within a building. And there are people who are living in the building and sampling their food. So there are lots of these new little entrepreneurs who are actually emerging during this particular lockdown, which is an interesting twist to the whole, so, the whole unfortunate
unexpected,
situation.
unexpected competition, so to speak, for
Yeah,
the cafes.
the only point is that when life becomes normal, the question is whether this unexpected competition will sustain, or whether they'll say, oh, let me go back to what I was doing. So that's the only other thing. But for some, it might be a passion, and they might say that, hey, I'm actually doing something which I love, and I prefer to do this rather than do something else in the past, which I was doing in the past.
Yeah. So that's quite interesting. And what about cloud kitchens? I mean, that's
I think cloud kitchens, I think, are a way to go. What you are seeing is that, look at it from a macro perspective. Certainly, the whole era of going to the market, buying vegetables, buying your meat, cutting it, preparing it, grinding your masalas, cooking it, and serving it, and then repeating the process with another set of ingredients from one meal to the next, and then doing that again for breakfast. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I always say, is the most complex exercise in an Indian house, because the meals have to be different. Otherwise, the consumers of them actually lose interest. And when you think of it from a supply chain perspective, it's a very, very complex business to be able to make sure that you have different kinds of food served at different meals. So with, what we are seeing with the the higher prevalence of working, of both the partners in the house actually working, whether it's the husband or the wife or both of them working, what you're beginning to see is that people are looking for convenience. So the first set of convenience actually started coming out in the form of ingredients. So gone are the days when you're grinding masalas. Now you just buy curry powders and you buy masala powders and things like that. You just mix. Then there are now ready-made packs which you can actually buy, which you just need to cook. Then there are, of course, ready-to-heat products which are there, which you just need to heat. So, on the one side, you've seen food products actually go through that curve in terms of evolution. Cloud kitchens was just the thing which was waiting to happen, because how would you eat? You would either have to cook at home or you had to go to a restaurant to eat, and then came along the delivery model. When the delivery model came along, initially people were very suspicious, saying that how will the food taste when it's delivered in my house versus actually being eaten in the restaurant? And then they found that some kinds of food actually taste pretty much the same. So if I what I define as a meal in a box, which means that you're buying one main item, which is like a pizza or a burger or something like that, which is going to be consumed by itself. So in a meal in a box actually tastes pretty much the same in the restaurant as in your home, even after it's delivered there. Whereas there are items which need to be, or even for that matter, a biryani tastes the same whether it's eaten in the restaurant or when you're eating it at home. So there are some things which actually have to be, added to. And when you start adding to, then things get a little messier when you actually buy at home, when you get these things at home. And you need to then mix different things to be able to even consume a meal. So what you are seeing is that cloud kitchens today have managed to actually look at what exactly is our popular items. And they've managed to look at these popular items and create these popular items independent of main restaurants and able to deliver the same under some pseudonym. You might call yourself XYZ restaurant. You really don't exist beyond the cloud, but you still are being part of an aggregator. Sometimes you're created by an aggregator, and sometimes you're part of the aggregator's platform, and you're then making yourself available to people. So cloud kitchens, to my mind, I think is a reality of the work life balance that Indian consumers are increasingly making today and will continue to make in the future. So cloud kitchens are here to stay and will certainly become a much larger part of our lives in the future. So we should recognize the impact that it's going to have in terms of the eating out model.
No, so then that in a way also has an impact on the QSRs and the casual restaurants, right? I mean, not the cafes, because if you have the convenience of ordering from a cloud kitchen or right, I mean, you might just choose. After all, the casual restaurant are for, I mean, a quick meal on the go where you are. It's not really an occasion dining out place, right? So do you see there is going to be some amount of impact from them on the industry?
Well, a part of this is actually what you call as a grab and go concept. So if you're familiar with the supermarkets, they have a section where typically they have prepared food where you can actually come and grab your food and go. Very popular in the Western world, but not so popular in India. It's translated in India into meal in a box. So many people actually just go take them, buy a meal in a box, and then take it back and then eat it. And also, meals in boxes are actually served in kiosks within offices also. So, that whole concept is actually becoming anyway popular. What you will see with cloud kitchens are those who don't want to move out of where they are versus those who want to go out. And a lot of people actually want to step out. For those who are stepping out, it's an opportunity for them to have a smoke, meet up with their friends who are working in the same office complex or the other, walk out a bit, have a coffee, have something to eat, chat a while, and come back. So it's a bit of a social experience. Whereas on the other hand, when you think of a cloud kitchen serving directly to your desk, and you're eating your small pizza at your desk, then you kind of completely engrossed in what you're doing, and you're just about trying to make sure that you finish that meal. So it's not about meeting, it's not about celebrating, but it's more about convenience. So think of it is that eating out is also driven by psychological reasons. It fulfills emotional needs in addition to fulfilling physiological needs. So if you have to be able to fulfill an emotional need, you might still have to go out. Whereas if you fulfill a physiological need, like have to feed myself, then maybe cloud kitchen deliveries, those things work well for you. So
No,
cloud kitchens are here to stay.
there's also the issue of price, right? I mean, the pandemic has left very little in the pockets of consumers. I mean, everybody's broke now with wage cuts and so on and so forth. So you would look at, I mean, so for restaurants have their job cut out, right, on the pricing front. On the one hand, they'll have to price attractively to get back the customers into their. I mean, you need to discount a bit, right? So how will this whole pricing conundrum kind of work out? You know, where you do, but at the same time, costs would definitely be higher. Your supply chain has got undeniably affected. So it's all going to be a little difficult, right?
Yeah. So if you're seeing it the way the restaurants are actually seeing it, and many of the cafes, what they are doing is they're all recrafting their menus. When I say recrafting the menus, it's about what's the what's the depth of a menu that they want to actually present to the customer. All the depth of the menu is actually shrunk quite a lot today. The second part of it is in terms of portion sizes. The third part of it is in terms of price points. So a lot of restaurants which are uncertain about how much custom are they going to be getting that particular week or month, etc. What they are actually doing is are shrinking their menus and making sure that they're actually able to give people essential food which they require. So even if you go to a fancy five-star hotel kitchen and you go to one of the Indian restaurants, it's not that you get the whole depth today at all. You get a very, very shrunk set menu because first of all buffets are out anyway. Then it's only a menu which is available, and it's even if you look at the a la carte menu, the a la carte menu is pretty small. If you look at it, most of the time they're encouraging you to go to a set menu, because if you go to a set menu, then the supply chains become a lot easier to be able to manage, and a set menu offers you significant value, like you might think of it like a buffet meal, but at a much lower price than even a buffet meal. So that's the way a lot of restaurants are actually reformatting their offering in order to make sure that they're able to target the price conscious, time conscious, and certainly the fear predominant customer who wants to come in and have as contactless an experience as possible. So that's what you're seeing people do, and I'm sure that's what you'll find across at a period of time. It'll take a while before people go back to the traditional menus that they used to have in the past.
Okay. And if you were to wear your retailer hat, I mean the retail consultant hat, I mean people are now, again this whole mall versus outside. Where do you think now post-pandemic will we see a shift in between the restaurants in the malls or the QSRs where getting? Where do you see? I mean, do you think the high streets will come back now?
High street, certainly, even if I were to look at it from a larger retail perspective and look at it from fashion and other categories and not just food, what you are seeing is that the high streets have actually recovered much faster than the malls have recovered. And the reality is that a lot of malls were under closure constraints while the high streets were open. And that's one part of it. The second part of it is high streets are closer to where the customers reside. So a lot of customers felt more comfortable going that short distance to buy something essential as opposed to going a longer distance to go towards a mall. But what you are beginning to see is that once the malls have remained open for a while, then the confidence that customers have in the malls have actually increased quite significantly. And the comfort that they have about health and sanitation in a mall is much higher than you might get on a high street store. So you are beginning to see that, and malls are very, very conscious about it, because a high street store is largely dependent on the owner of that store in terms of determining what kind of health standards do they maintain within, and what kind of safety standards do they have for both the employees and the customers. And what you are seeing is that there's a lot to be desired in the case of high street stores. But in the case of mall stores, the mall authorities actually enforce pretty high safety standards. And because they're enforcing much higher safety standards, all the tenants are forced to follow the same. And customers, once they start visiting a mall, have begun to actually see a lot more, get a lot more confidence in going back to a mall. So you're beginning to see that the mall traffic is actually picking up much faster. Though at this point of time, high streets are actually doing better than malls are, because the number of contact points in a high street is much less than the number of contact points in a mall. In a mall, you've got to go, you've got to park, you've got to come back, you've got to press the elevator, go up to the floor that you want, walk across, you've got to be touching something, going into a store. It's a much longer process and there are a lot more touch points. Whereas in a high street store, there are hardly any touch points. You just walk in, buy what you want, and walk out. So it makes people, some customers feel a little more confident doing something like that as opposed to going to a mall. But they are picking up. Malls are also picking up as well at this again, though a little later than high street stores.
Okay, I think we must be running out of time, but I have to ask a personal question before. Which is your favorite cuisine? What do you enjoy? I mean, if you had to on an occasion choose a meal, what kind of meal really gets you?
My favorite is actually Japanese cuisine. And my favorite restaurant is in Bangalore. I don't want to name it for obvious reasons, but it's very close to my home. And that's a cuisine that I actually like. But I know it's a cuisine which actually travels very badly. I can never afford to order it as a takeaway or as a home delivery because it just tastes so different when it comes home. Because we've got to remember when you do things like home delivery. I have a hot dish. It's in a biodegradable packaging. It's sweating inside the packaging. So by the time I get it here, I've got soggy packaging, first of all. Certainly, the dish looks very different than when it's set out in the restaurant. And when I serve it onto a plate, I find it sometimes very difficult to justify why did I pay five-star prices for something like this, which is looking even worse than a three-star restaurant the moment I'm serving it in my house. So, so it is a challenge for a lot of the five-star hotels to actually do door delivery because their prices are just not justifiable any longer because the dishes look very, very different the moment they come into somebody's homes. So my favorite anyway is Japanese, and I certainly will only go there and eat it. I certainly won't order it in at home. No
Okay.
takeaway.
And as an investor, which is the cuisine that you think is the safest bet in India?
Difficult because I think a lot of cuisines do very well. And I think it's more important to figure out which is the right experience to back.
Okay.
Because cuisines can be replicated,
Hmm.
but experiences can't.
Hmm.
So which is why you've got to figure out what's the right experience to back. You've got to figure out that this is a fixed cost model,
Hmm.
which means you pay rental for the day. You made the investment for the day. So how do I get as many table turns as possible? How do I make sure that my restaurant is as appealing at breakfast time as it is at dinner time? How do I ensure that my food is as appealing as the drinks that I serve within? And if you can get that right, then you certainly have a very, very successful model.
Wow. On that note, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you,
So,
Chitra. Thank you very much for that conversation. I certainly appreciated it.
yeah. Bye.
Bye bye.